Well, hello and welcome aboard, everybody. It's Rob from PMDG, back with another tutorial episode for our Douglas DC-6 from Microsoft Flight Simulator. You know, in a decade of flying the DC-3, one of the things that I most enjoy about it is hand flying. Except when it's turbulent or IMC. Then it gets tiring, and it gets tiring quickly, which is where the Gyrolpilot comes in the DC-6. In this episode, I'm going to show you how to use it to make your life easier. So, let's get started. So here we are at about 17,000 feet at cruise. And I say about 17,000 feet because we've been hand flying for the past 4.5 hours while we've been teaching you all the other stuff about the airplane. And you'll notice we're just kind of wandering about our altitude. It's not very professional, and actually it's flat out sloppy. So we're going to use the Gyropilot to unload us from having to do all that altitude and heading maintenance. First, a little bit about the Gyropilot on the DC-6. It's not an autopilot. It's located right here, and it is called a Gyropilot. This is a very early Generation 1 implementation of what would later become full autopilots. But don't let that fool you. It's actually really good at what it does. It uses these wheels to maintain pitch and this wheel to maintain roll, which ultimately, for what we're trying to accomplish, is basically the entire game. Using pitch and roll, we can maintain heading, we can maintain altitude, and we can maintain rate of climb, much like you would using the manual trim wheels on the airplane in order to maintain your course and heading. Now, one of the other things that it does for us is it does have the ability to follow a beam, which is really nice. You get a course set in your GPS and it will follow it. You can also set it up to follow an ILS, which makes it a pretty robust solution considering that it's 70 years old. This red light tells you if the Gyropilot has disconnected itself for some reason. This blue light tells you when the Gyropilot is active. All right. Enough with technical orientation. This is making me tired, and neither of us can take a nap until we get it turned on. So, how are we going to do that? This right here is your Gyropilot on-off switch. For you modern airline pilot guys, think of this like your arm switch. When it's on, the Gyropilot is now active and it is available to take control of flying the airplane. Down here is your engage lever. This is a mechanical clutch that allows the Gyropilot to exert forces on the control cables to control the pitch and roll of the airplane. To engage the Gyropilot, we're just going to reach up here to the Gyropilot on switch and move it to the on position. Then we're going to reach down here to the clutch, move that to the on position. The Gyropilot is now controlling both the pitch and the roll of the airplane. Since we had a very slight descent at the time we engaged the Gyropilot, you'll notice that the Gyropilot's maintaining pitch and we've got a slight descent rate. It's also holding the wings level, which is not the same as holding heading. The Gyropilot will not hold a heading, it will hold roll. We'll talk about that more in a second. For now, let's focus on controlling pitch. These two wheels right here are actually a single control. They're very much like the trim wheels that you use to maintain pitch when flying manually. I recommend that you control these using your center mouse wheel, and then you just roll it back to pitch up, you roll it forward to pitch down. Think of them like you would use electric trim. A little bit of roll forward will pitch the airplane down, a little roll backward will pitch the airplane up. Ignore these labels. It's a sort of a human factors problem. They make it sound like you have to use one for glide and one for climb. You don't. They're connected. You can roll it forward, you can roll it back. Both of them move the same, and they work identically. Now, I'm going to time accelerate us through a descent. And what I've done is I've rolled these trim wheels ahead a little bit to start us downhill so that we can level out at 15,000 feet. Now, as we approach 15,000 feet, I'm not just going to throw the autopilot altitude hold switch on because, well, that's rude. What I'm going to do instead is use the pitch wheels on the Gyropilot to reduce the rate of descent as much as possible. And you'll notice that I've gotten the rate of descent down to just a little bit more than 100 feet per minute, and we're very slowly, very gently approaching our level off altitude. This is the correct technique for a Gyropilot of this age. It's not going to anticipate an altitude capture. That's the pilot's job. You need to set it up to succeed. As we approach our level off altitude, I just scroll back on these wheels a tiny little bit, get the rate of descent as close to zero as possible. You can see now we're sitting right on top of that 15,000 foot altitude we wanted. I'm going to reach over here and I'm going to turn this altitude control switch on. Now the autopilot's going to maintain 15,000 feet for us, just like a normal modern autopilot. So let's do a quick review of the details there. As you're changing altitudes, if you're using the Gyropilot, you'll use those two little trim wheels to maintain the pitch of the airplane. As you approach your level off altitude, use the pitch wheels to reduce your rate of climb as much as possible. Get down to about 100 feet per minute and just very slowly level off. Once you've done that, click the altitude hold on, and the Gyropilot will now maintain altitude. Piece of cake. Alright, now let's talk about roll for a moment. Roll is obviously banking left and banking right. Your Gyropilot has a turn knob. You've probably noticed this sitting right on top of the Gyropilot. You can turn it left, you can turn it right. When you go left or when you go right, moving this knob will turn the airplane under control of the Gyropilot, but it does have some neat limits. You can roll this thing all the way to the full extent of its turn. The airplane's going to bank 25 degrees. No more, no less. As long as you leave that all the way over, it'll stay at 25 degrees. We'll move it here back probably about 2/3 of the way or so, and see, the airplane rolls nicely back to, about 10 degrees of right-hand turn. Pretty straightforward and simple. When you want to go wings level again, what I recommend you do is roll this right back this way. In view number 5, if you zoom in right here, you'll notice this white line lines right up between those two words up there where it says automatic approach. You put that white line right there, you'll be wings level again. I'm not quite sure why the designers at Sperry decided not to give you like an actual notch there that you could look at, but they didn't, so that's what I've discovered works. Now let's talk about how you take control of the airplane back from the Gyropilot if it's not doing what you wanted or you need to change the game a little bit. It's pretty straightforward. Fastest way, drop the clutch lever to the off position. Also, you can just simply turn the Gyropilot off. If you want to come out of altitude hold, say you want to do another climb or another descent, you simply move altitude to off and then use these two trim wheels to pitch up or pitch down. If you did disconnect your Gyropilot and you want to turn it back on, put the Gyropilot on switch first, then re-engage the clutch, and you're back in business. Now let's talk about this altitude control switch. I've mentioned a few times that sometimes older airplanes, the labeling ain't all that great. The altitude control switch really is not an on and off. It has two modes. Up, when it's on, means it's controlling altitude. If it's in the off position, it means the Gyropilot is controlling pitch. So you really need to kind of look at the altitude control switch a little bit suspiciously. If the switch is in the on position, the Gyropilot's handling altitude. If it's in the off position, the Gyropilot is maintaining pitch, and you can adjust it using those trim wheels. Now, the turn knob is a little bit more straightforward. If the Gyropilot's engaged, that turn knob is what you're going to use to keep the wings level, or to turn left, or to turn right. There's no real hidden mode there that you need to worry about. So now, let's talk about how the Gyropilot can also follow a course. What I'm about to explain, I'm going to focus on the GPS, but it's also true for following a VOR course. Up here on the top of the Gyropilot, you can see that there's a 3-position rotator. It's got Gyropilot, localizer, and approach positions. When it's in the Gyropilot position, you're using that turn knob to maintain the course or heading by rolling the airplane left or right or maintaining wings level. If you switch it to localizer, then the airplane will follow a beam using the Gyropilot. If you switch it to approach, then it'll do an ILS. We'll cover that in another lesson entirely. So let's jump up here to the GPS. I'm going to put us direct to, there we go. And I'm going to put us direct to Narsarsuaq, Greenland. You can see our course is sliding off to the left there. So I'm just going to switch the Gyropilot over to localizer mode. And you'll notice the Gyropilot is now going to follow that beam course, which is about 70 degrees, so the Gyropilot is making a nice turn to intercept it. In just a moment here, yeah, 70 degrees. Okay, so in just a moment you'll see the Gyropilot's going to complete its turn to do the intercept. It will then track that beam just like a regular autopilot when you put it in LNAV. The nice thing about using the Garmin GPS is that it does have a roll steering capability, so the Gyropilot will follow an entire course. You don't have to recenter it every time you cross a fix. Obviously, if you're flying VOR to VOR, your Gyropilot will follow the beam and whatever you've got selected, so you'll want to pay attention to that. But if you notice, our course is coming back in, and the Gyropilot's doing a nice job of just sort of dialing it in, and it will follow along with it. This is all right done in the localizer setting, and localizer really means it's going to go ahead and follow a beam. Obviously, when the Gyropilot was created, they didn't have a GPS, so they did pretty much everything using this turn knob, and then they would switch this to the localizer to track a beam or approach in order to fly an approach. Again, we're going to talk about approaches in a little bit later episode. So, that pretty much covers it. Here we are at 15,000 feet. We're tracking the course to Narsarsuaq, Greenland. And, well, alright. Welcome to 1950s avionics. You're going to notice we've kind of fallen off our altitude just a tiny little bit. We're about 40 feet below our 15,000 foot altitude. And well, we're professional pilots, so we're not going to let that stand. So we're going to turn off the altitude hold, and then just one little click on the pitch control wheel on the Gyropilot, and you'll notice now we're climbing back up a little bit, and we've got about 50 feet of climb rate. And once the airplane gets on the altitude here, I'm just going to look right back down. I'm going to click the altitude hold on, and all right, now we're back on altitude. We look like professionals. So we can go back to sipping our coffee and pretending that all of this is really difficult. It's all about image after all. Okay, I think that's about enough for today. As always, thank you for flying with PMDG. Fly safely, be well, be good to one another. We'll see you real soon.